Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene, where, empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world. My name is the Rev Lois Van Leer, she, her, hers, and I am the developmental minister of this church. Today, I am joined in the leadership of worship by our worship associate and member of our ministerial search team, Robin Schantz-Mulford, our director of music, Mitch Davey, collaborative pianist, Susanne Giordano, and behind the scenes working tech, Kat Johnson. The words of one of our hymns, Morning Has Come, proclaims, morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Welcome to this day. Welcome to the light of hope. Welcome to what guides our journey home. I invite you to the Soul Matters group on Tuesday night at 7:30. This small group ministry format is open to anyone who would like to attend. We will be discussing next month's theme, which is belonging. Young adults are meeting this Wednesday at 7:30. Pass the word along. The Black Church viewing and discussion, which is on PBS, will continue this Thursday at 7. Be aware that we are in the time of our annual budget drive, so you will have stewards contacting you. As Jennifer implored you last week, please take their calls. Welcome to all of you who are visiting us today. Please fill out the visitor form that you will find in the chat. We love to know who's with us and to be able to contact you. If all those announcements that I spoke were too fast for you to write down or to take in, please refer to our weekly Connections newsletter. I'd like to introduce Patrick Phillips, who is speaking to us about our annual budget drive this year.
Good morning. I'm Patrick Phillips. I've been a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene for just about 20 years. And the church has really played an important part of my life that entire time. First, as really a place of introspection as I think about the way that I live my life, what values I have, what my relationship is with others, and what my role in society is. But ever increasingly, I've seen it as an important place for others and my own responsibility in helping to create that environment. I've been involved in fundraising at the church off and on for that entire time, the 20 years. And many times we get together in cottage meetings or think about what the next mission statement is going to be or whatever we might be chatting about. And again and again and again, there is one word that always rises to the top that describes what we do in the church, and that is community. We build a community of like-minded individuals who support each other in a variety of ways, including, of course, in our own spiritual paths. And that is really an important part of everything that we do. And it's really become really important to me as I think about how I interact in the church, how I support others in the work that they do. And also during that 20 years, I've seen many transitions in the church. And I think this year we have a unique opportunity. It's actually only come around a few times in the last few decades, and that is to call a settled minister. And the one thing that we know to be successful in that is to create stability within the church. And so this year's fundraising campaign, I think, is especially important for that. But for me, there's also a personal aspect of that, and that is my own love and support for our dear minister, Lois Van Leer, who has really done so much for us. And I really think there's an opportunity to create a legacy, to really honor her in what she has given the church as we make this transition to the next phase of our church life. And so as we think about community, as I think about my own role in building community, that's what I'm thinking about this year. I think we recognize what's going on in the world, this ever accelerating pace of just change and chaos and fractionation among viewpoints. And so the church is ever more important as a place of respite and stability. My good friend John Wagner, when he was president of the church, when I was on the board, used to say that the number one role that the church has is to provide an opportunity for people to come together and understand and live their Unitarian Universalist values, and then just go out in the world and live that. That is the number one thing that we can do in the world. And I love to think about a world in which that were true, and more people were able to find the church, find support within the church, and live those values out in the world, because I think we all agree that the world would be a better place. So thank you for your engagement in the church, everything that you all do for keeping the energy going, the spiritual energy, even during this pandemic, as we get together virtually. And thanks for all the church staff and all that they do as well. We really owe it to them and the entire community to step forward with our support this year. Thank you very much.
We light this chalice to kindle the promise of its flame, liberation of hearts and minds, engagement of intellect and intuition, an invitation to all. We light this chalice to light our way as we travel the road of promises made and broken, and the recommitment and renewal to those promises. We call to one another from the east, the south, the west, the north. We call from our homes, our shelters, our distances between. We call to one another from the isolation and missing we have been with for over a year. We call to one another that we may remember who we are as a community, who we are as part of that community. Faces, voices, encounters. We call across borders and boundaries, connecting in spite of barriers, viruses, social distancing. And we call out, come into this place to be reminded that there is still meaning in the midst of so much that seems meaningless, that this community lives and calls you in, calls you home to yourself, calls.
Please join us in singing our first hymn, number 20, Be Thou My Vision, verses 1 and 2.
So I would say to you, let your body go into relaxation. Invite your heart to rest. Tell your mind to knock it off, to let you simply be present. If thoughts intrude, metaphorically wave them goodbye. Settle into quiet, into stillness. May it be so. Amen.
Our reading today comes from the Reverend Dennis McCarty. Human beings are at our best when we make solemn promises to one another and try hard to keep them. We are promise-making, promise-keeping, promise-breaking, promise-renewing creatures. Our very humanity lies in the way we carry out our promises to our families, our coworkers, our neighbors, and our fellow members of the human family. To be genuine, a covenant must be a covenant of being. It's not just about good words, but about actions.
I want to give a shout out to Ezra Black, our coordinator of children's programming, for finding that story and so many stories that he finds for me when I'm the preacher, because I just don't know them. So thank you, Ezra. I know it's an interesting choice to talk about promises we cannot keep during a month that focuses on commitment. But I don't think you can talk about commitment without talking about all the ways in which we cannot and do not keep our commitments, our promises. Recently, Frankie Hill from our board, our intern Jennifer, myself, Jones Hollister, and Alex Capitan, a UUA consultant, drafted a statement to go on the church's website. It was to be a statement of affirmation and welcome for BIPOC persons, trans, non-binary, and queer folk, and disabled persons. Why? Because these are the identities that are most in need at the moment of our radical hospitality. Our denomination has made this commitment at this moment in time, and it is your board's commitment and your staff's commitment. In discussing this statement, I found myself unwilling to use language that says that UCC or any church is a safe place for any of those identities. Why? Well, because we aren't there yet. I wanted to throw in the language of aspiration and intent to sort of temper those words, to allow us to acknowledge the ways in which we cannot help but fall short of the full inclusion of many marginalized identities, that we will make mistakes. Yet Alex Capitan, who many of you heard preach last year on trans inclusion in our UU beloved community, said just because you cannot do it perfectly is no reason not to include the declarative language of affirmation. We will screw up. We will fall short at times when it comes to the full inclusion of marginalized identities. But it is no reason to shrink from working toward radical hospitality. In the discussion with Alex, I realized that there are promises we cannot keep, but that it's no reason for us not to make them. Now, there's a difference between promises we cannot keep and being disingenuous or outright lying. Lying is intentional deceit. It's a failure of right relationship. It harms the one being lied to, and ultimately it harms the liar. But not everyone who makes a promise and then breaks it is a liar. I ask those of you who have chosen marriage to think back to your ceremony. Did you make vows to one another? And if so, have you kept them perfectly? Not so much, perhaps, but you absolutely 100% meant them when you said them at that time. It doesn't make you a liar. I cannot tell you how many couples have the word always before the vows they are promising one another. I once listened as one of the partners read a page and a half of promises to their beloved. 1.5 pages of always? It's a setup. As Carl Jung said, the one who promises everything is sure to fulfill nothing. Vows, promises, they're beacons. They're guiding our way back to safe ground, just as a buoy guides the ships in the thick fog to a safe harbor. I tell couples to write vows that they know that they can keep. And of course, some of those lines will be aspirational, but please, not all of them have to be aspirational, and dispense with the always. And I usually say in the ceremony, you need to forgive each other right now for all the ways in which you will either break or fall short of those vows. The other third word I think that we need to eliminate when talking about promises or vows or commitments is never. You know that old adage, never say never, and with good reason. When something is hypothetical, but not yet lived, it is easy and common to say, I would never. But reality is not hypothetical. Come face to face with the situation, one might find that what one thought one would never do now seems like the best option. And like always, never cannot be predetermined. Life happens, taking twists and turns that we cannot even anticipate, requiring us to have to reorient our thinking, our decision-making process, and our actions. Never is a promise we cannot keep. Once again, I just want to reiterate that this isn't about being deceitful or lying outright. Our promises, our commitments are about the trust and faith we want to establish in a relationship. So think of them as the borders and the boundaries and the framework that creates safety and trustworthiness. Let's look at some of these other promises we make but cannot keep. In particular, the ones that we want to make to children, our own or other people's children. Now, these promises come from a place of good intent, often in an effort to soothe or assure, to allay fear. I'll never die. I'll never leave you. I'll always protect you. We make these promises in the moment. That we can keep none of them is no fault of our own. We may wish we could never leave our children, but they or we eventually do leave one another. And though we want more than anything else in the world to keep those whom we love safe and secure, there's no way that is a promise we can keep. I have no idea what the latest psychological research recommends when it comes to answering a child's plea for their parents not to die, because every answer seems to have the potential to confuse or add to the anxiety. Saying, I won't die right now, or I'm not dying anytime soon, leaves the child wondering every moment when you will die. When is that time? And saying that we all die sometime is often beyond comprehension. Promising that you will never die may provide what is needed in the moment, but will it somehow be a source of betrayal somewhere down the road? I promise to always tell the truth. Don't we wish? Am I calling all of us liars? Well, yes and no. We distinguish between lies, capital L, capital I, capital E, capital S, and little white lies that are supposedly harmless. There are those who are sociopaths and have no capacity for truth-telling or understanding the consequences of lying and deceit in relationship. Then there are those who lie because they're afraid of what the truth would reveal or set in motion. Sometimes we lie thinking we can protect those whom we love by not telling them the truth. Now, it's easy in the throes of new love to be absolute truth tellers because the years have not built up yet. There is less to lose in the beginning, and that excitement of the new relationship begs for truths to pour out and be shared. But as the years and the dynamics grow, more is at stake. One may find oneself withholding truths or skirting them. Here's another promise we cannot keep. I will never hurt you. Look, if we're in any relationship or depth or meaning, things will at some point get messy or go askew. We will get hurt. Not all of us are clear communicators 100% of the time, nor are we particularly skilled in conflict or its resolution. Hence, miscommunication, which can lead to misunderstanding, which can lead to hurt. The goal is clearer communication and understanding and further, deeper connection. I was saying to someone the other day that a relationship doesn't go the distance until it's been through a conflict that finds its way to resolution. Ironically, after a break in relationship, it often finds itself stronger after the repair. And I learned this through a fireplace insert. I had one installed in a home that I used to live in, and pretty soon the stovepipe separated from the stove. So I called the dealer and I demanded a new insert immediately. They wanted to weld the stovepipe to the stove, saying it would actually create a stronger bond. I wasn't having it. I'd paid for this thing. It was a new insert. Fix it or give me my money back. So they gave me an entirely new insert. A little while later, the same thing happened with the new insert. The stovepipe separated from the stove. This time when I called, I asked them to weld the two pieces back together. And lo and behold, the weld after the break was stronger. Relationships that experience a break and work their way through to a welding back together are stronger. We will hurt one another. The issue is what we do with that break, that hurt. At this point, you may be asking, what good are promises if we cannot keep them? Why not just dispense with them altogether? But promises are, quote, an avowal of intent. They are interpersonal contracts that facilitate trust and love. Promises or commitments are often made at a certain time in a certain context or situation. There are, as an article in Psychology Today stated, reasons why we actually break our promises. Our feelings, our capacity, or circumstances have changed over time. What once was is no more. We may no longer have the capability or willingness to keep a specific promise, or it may no longer benefit those concerned to do so. And as a 17th century French moralist and memoirist wrote, we promise according to our hopes and perform according to our fears. Sometimes, a promise may no longer be of benefit to those concerned. Love is not a forever guarantee, or always, romantic or filial. People change. They find they have differing needs. They've grown apart. They cannot find their way back to one another. Sometimes we have to love one another enough to let one another go, to release someone from their vows or promises, to acknowledge the value and gifts of those promises, to realize that some friendships, some partnerships, some professions run their course. Locking oneself into something that's no longer mutually beneficial, or worse, has become harmful, does more damage than breaking a promise. Martyrdom does not create a healthy relationship, and often it can breed resentment. I have found, ironically, that promises, vows, commitments can free rather than hinder or impede. Writing in 2019 about commitment, the Peruvian-born priest, Father Pablo Magone, says, "Commitment indeed does away with other options. But from commitment comes permanence, stability, and happiness. People who make concrete, irrevocable choices are happier than those who prefer leaving their options open and fail to choose definitively one thing over another." It would seem to be the opposite, that a commitment to this thing denies you that thing. But keeping one's options open also eludes longevity of relationship and the rewards of such intimacy. Sometimes when you keep all your options open, you end up with nothing. Promising, choosing, committing to one thing allows you to settle in, to have relaxation, be relaxed into one's choice fully. This statement is attributed to Abraham Lincoln, and he wrote, supposedly, "Commitment is what transforms a promise into reality. It is the words that speak boldly of your intentions, and the actions which speak louder than words. It is making the time when there is none, coming through time after time after time, year after year after year. Commitment is the stuff character is made of, the power to change the face of things. It is the daily triumph of integrity over skepticism." I go back to Father Magone because he says that commitment itself is in crisis. Not just the big stuff like commitment to one another in marriage or to a vocation, but even in the simplest of things. He wrote, "It has become acceptable to live uncommitted even to the smallest things. Plans have become tentative, always meant to be confirmed later. Many are plagued by the concern that something better will come along, or they may not feel like doing whatever they committed to whenever the time comes. Our ability to communicate instantly has hastened this attitude. We are now able to confirm an appointment minutes before or cancel it because something more interesting emerged. Things have become tentative. Something better will come along." Are there better churches out there somewhere that you could choose? Probably. But there comes a time when we need to choose one another, to decide to pick a church, a community, and commit to it, even if it or we are not perfect. Maybe it can be perfect for us. Always holding back and holding out denies folks of what full immersion in a community can offer. And here's the thing. One can only live on buffet-style religion for so long because a little of this and a little of that only skims the surface, leaving one unsatisfied and nowhere near satiated. At some point, the need for consistency, to go deeper, to be in the familiar wins out. We promise, we commit, we cast our lot with one another. Which brings me back to the statement that the board, Alex, Jones, and Jennifer and I crafted for the website. The Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene affirms the inherent worth and dignity of people of all races, ethnicities, genders, sexualities, disabilities, and backgrounds. This congregation is committed to being a church where people with marginalized identities, particularly Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, transgender, non-binary, and LGBTQI+ people, and disabled people can bring their whole selves and experience full inclusion. The ever ongoing work of countering racism, transphobia, homophobia, ableism, and other oppressions in ourselves, our church community, and the wider community is an essential part of who we are as a people of a justice-seeking faith. We are committing in that statement to doing the work that will allow UUCE to be a radically inclusive and hospitable place for folks formerly pushed to the margins, folks who have sometimes been harmed by churches in the past, but who long for a spiritual home, a place that they can call their own. And we will make mistakes as we commit to this work, but hopefully we will reduce harm to marginalized persons. This is messy, imperfect work. Fearing the making of mistakes for not getting it right, it's no excuse for not committing to the work. Got it wrong the first, the second, or the third time? Apologize. Ask for a recommitment to conversation and relationship. Learn from the interaction. Keep learning. I say all of this as someone who has erred so many times and in so many ways in this work, right here at UUCE. But folks who I have caused harm to have been as committed to right relationship as I have been. They have been patient and gracious. Not all persons from marginalized identities may be so patient and gracious with those of us with privilege who are trying to learn. There comes a time when a marginalized person or group, they're over having to ask for affirmation and inclusion of their mere personhood. It's not mine to confer. It is mine, all of ours, to affirm. I ask you to commit to the statement of affirmation on our website, to actively engage in whatever work is necessary to make that statement true, to make promises we may not be able to keep. It will require more than words. It will require action. I am asking you to commit at this time, in this community, to move beyond fear, confusion, and discomfort. Together, let's transform a promise into the reality of a beloved community. May it be so. So be it. Blessed be. We bring all of who we are into the circle of community. If you have a joy or a sorrow that you would like to have held or lifted up in this circle of community, please feel free to enter it into the chat now. May a chalice be lit in the hearts of those who grieve. May a chalice be lit in the hearts of those who take joy in the garden, in the blooms, in the sun, in the arrival of spring. May a chalice be lit in the hearts of those who have received the vaccine. And may it be lit in the hearts of those who cannot be with one another because they have not received it yet. May a chalice be lit in the hearts of those who are allowed to be able to hug those whom they love after a year. And may a chalice be lit in the hearts of those who are still separated from those whom they love. May we have a chalice lit in our world for those who are struggling, who are having a hard time. May we light a chalice for our world, that our leaders and we lead with compassion for one another. May we light a chalice in one another's hearts. May it be a promise, a commitment to this community here and now. May it be so.
The Sunday offerings in March go to the Farm Worker Emergency Fund at Peñeros y Campesinos Unidos del Noreste, Oregon's largest Latino union, which empowers farm workers and working Latinx families. Farm workers and their families have been severely impacted by COVID-19, as well as the economic fallout. In keeping with the worship theme for March, which is commitment, please commit whatever you can to those in desperate need. For additional information about PCUN, please go to their website, which will be listed in the chat. May these offerings of our lives be transformed, that lives may be transformed.
Benediction comes from Brian Andreas. He wrote, "Say yes. Whatever it is, say yes with your whole heart, and simple as it sounds, that's all the exercise life needs to grab you by the hands and start to dance."